Greetings and welcome back to my house, which means that we still have Castlevania topics to cover, and today's subject, opinions. Something that we're all entitled to, but sometimes some people will stretch the limits, and today I felt like those limits were stretched. And who else to test those limits than MojoPlay, of course, when they released their video, Top 10 Worst Castlevania Games. Now, I don't have any ill will against the person who commentates in this video, as frankly I have more ill will towards the thoughts that they have rather than the individual themselves. As my philosophy goes, attack the idea, not the person. And yes, I did watch this video beforehand before making this video, just to get an understanding as to where they were coming from. And oh my god, the entire list itself is very questionable, and I want the experience that I had watching this with all of you, as well as giving my opinion as to each of the games that they put in certain spots. So, without further ado, let's get into MojoPlay's the top 10 worst Castlevania games.
Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're taking a look at the 10 worst Castlevania games. For as much as we love Castlevania, and Lord knows I do, my goodness, I just started replaying Symphony of the Night for like the billionth time.
Okay, not to sound like an ass, but something tells me they only mentioned Symphony of the Night to give themselves credibility as a potential Castlevania fan, which, fine, I guess. Not the example I would have used, but okay. Then again, they had to establish a connection to the audience somehow, as these aren't individual people's thoughts on one individual channel. It's a fucking company channel with many different people doing different thoughts on things. It's like IGN, where the reviewer changes constantly and we can never have consistency with them. Anyway, moving on. I simply just thought it was odd that they had to mention Symphony of the Night.
Castlevania, aka Castlevania 64.
Really? This high up in the list? I wonder what reasons he has to put it this high.
Transitioned video games from the second to the third dimension, some franchises got lost in the shift and went down in infamy. Castlevania was one of those and went down this dark road when it launched its first 3D game on the Nintendo 64.
Yes, in fact it's so infamous for being bad that only Castlevania fans remember it for being bad, instead of, you know, the populace. Also, in this part he just states the fucking obvious, like of course, when you shift to 3D, of course you're not gonna have a good transition. In fact, most third-party games had trouble trying to ease their way into 3D. Hell, you can make the same argument for most of the PS1 games. Or you can make another argument that most companies had trouble trying to make their games on portable systems. Basically, this argument just lies on the fact that most companies have trouble trying to do any new systems, which if you ask me is always going to fucking happen. So I don't entirely blame Castlevania 64 for this, however, he's not wrong though. Considering the Castlevania games that we did get for the N64, they're practically shunned by most of the community, or just flat out forgotten entirely. Anyway, let's see if he further explains himself.
It wasn't downright awful compared to other notorious N64 games, but for Castlevania, this was incredibly weak.
Okay, problem 1 cited. We are supposed to be comparing Castlevania games, not comparing Castlevania games to outside properties. Because if that's the case, then any Castlevania game can be labeled a worse compared to something else. We have to be sticking to comparing Castlevania games to Castlevania games, or we'll just end up in situations like this. It's like if I were to do a top 10 worst Crash games and compare Crash Purple to Circle of the fucking Moon. It wouldn't make any sense. The only reason where I can see why they did this is to offer a form of perspective. But even then, we can't do that without objectifying the list. So yeah, just stick to comparing Castlevania games to other Castlevania games for the sake of this list.
Levels were unevenly paced, sometimes dragging out far longer than others.
Okay, and? Are you essentially complaining that some levels are longer than others? Because if so, that is about the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Of course, some levels are going to be longer than others. Most Castlevania games do this. Then by that same logic, Symphony of the Night should be not good because of the fact that some areas of the map drag out longer than the fucking introduction section. Oh, but you play the most popular Castlevania game amongst the community, so of course you know what you're talking about. What other reason does he have?
And of course, the camera did not make platforming any easier than it was in 2D.
Okay, that's a fair criticism. The camera was awful. Then again, most of the new Castlevania games had an awful camera up until Curse of Darkness, so
Like we said earlier, Castlevania could have been a lot worse than games like Quest 64 or Earthworm Jim 3D, but it simply just wasn't the smooth transition that Castlevania really needed.
And like I said before, let's stop comparing it to outside properties. Alright, what did he put for number 9?
Castlevania 2: Simon's Quest.
Oh, absolutely fucking not. The fact that this game is not top 3 worst Castlevania games in this list astounds me. But you know what? Go ahead, explain yourself.
Like Castlevania 64, Simon's Quest isn't super dreadful.
I can't wait for that statement to mean absolutely nothing within the next few seconds.
It holds the same level of difficulty as its predecessor between the hordes of enemies, tough bosses, and bullshit knockback. However, what really kills this game is the level design. For an NES game, it's surprisingly expansive, but Konami fails to provide any sense of direction.
Okay. So how is this not the worst?
Those unfamiliar with Simon's Quest will need a guide just to figure out where they need to head to next. Otherwise, be prepared to spend a solid hour or two wandering around aimlessly before you find any progress.
So please inform me again as to why this is not number 1? I swear, this is coming from the same people who thought it was a good idea to put Zelda 2 on the top of their top 8 worst fucking Zelda games. Castlevania 2 is fucking abysmal. It is god-awful. Yes, the level design is awful, but when that makes up the crutch of the entire fucking game, of course it's going to be the fucking worst. And the fact that you chose to put it in 9th astounds me. You cited the game's biggest criticisms. In fact, the worst of its criticisms being the fact that this game does not help you at all in trying to figure out where to go. And yet you put it in 9th anyway. Oh my god, fuck it, I'm gonna have a brain aneurysm. What did he put for number 8?
Castlevania Chronicles.
Yep, that's it. This list is bullshit. There is no fucking way this man just put fucking Castlevania Chronicles in front of fucking Simon's Quest. There's no fucking way.
When it comes to Castlevania and PlayStation, most of us will think of Symphony of the Night, you know, the best game in the entire franchise and one of the best games ever made.
Hopping back to Symphony of the Night, are we? Well, in this case, it's permissible. Anyway, continue.
As for Castlevania Chronicles, well, we typically don't talk about this one.
Oh, and do explain to me as to why we don't talk about Castlevania Chronicles. Also, who the fuck is we?
The PlayStation version didn't do much to justify its asking price. Unlockable content offered no real incentive to replay the game.
Okay, so we're arguing from a replayability standpoint. Cool. That means all the Castlevania games before Bloodlines should be in this list. Listen, that's what you're arguing, not me.
The music didn't hit the same as previous installments.
Did we play the same fucking game? Okay, not only does this game have 4 separate versions for one track, so if I were to take Vampire Killer in this game, you would have the arranged version and then you would have the other versions that came from the other systems that it used to be on. And you wanna tell me that the music in this game did not hit? There's no way that this fucker played the game. Absolutely none. Or if he did, he just didn't play the right one. Because how on earth are you gonna argue from a place of music? Then in that fucking case, Castlevania 64 should be here, as it's by far the worst in music quality. Oh my god, this argument is so stupid.
And the visuals were extraordinarily outdated.
I don't see how. Once again, in that case, Castlevania 64 should be here. And so should the other old Castlevania games that came from the NES. It's like saying a game is bad because it's old. That makes no fucking sense.
Especially by the time the PlayStation version launched in 2001. Really, if you played Symphony of the Night, why did you need Chronicles?
This argument has as much merit as me saying that Final Fantasy XII is awful because it doesn't look like Final Fantasy X. It means that the argument is stupid.
Really, just, you don't even need to touch this one. Watch a playthrough. That's it.
No, in fact, I actually recommend this game. It's actually a solid experience. Granted, it's Castlevania 1 all over again, but so is Super Castlevania 4, and look how well that one got praised for. Oh my god, this list thus far is by far the dumbest. We've only gone to number 8, and there's so many reaches, you could practically call it Halo. This list has already lost all of its fucking credibility, and we're only on number 8. Alright, what stupid placement is next?
Castlevania Puzzle, Encore of the Night.
This is such an obvious answer that I'm just going to skip it. Also, who the fuck played this?
Castlevania Order of Shadows.
Personally, I've never played Order of Shadows, but from what I've been told and everything that I've seen of the game, yeah, I'll agree with him on this one. As to its placement, I'm not entirely sure, but I can agree it's one of the worst.
Castlevania Legacy of Darkness.
Oh my god, you just put the same fucking game in again. Before anyone says anything, Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness are the same fucking game. It's just that one has more content than the other. However, this placement makes no sense, considering that Castlevania 64 is like, what, number 10? And now, look how far I went into the list, and here's fucking Legacy of Darkness? Shouldn't these two be right next to each other on the list? Do keep in mind that this list was made by a supposed fan. Test its credibility if you like.
Are we technically putting the same game on here twice?
Yes! It's like saying that the original Symphony of the Night and the Symphony of the Night on the PS4 are two different games. They're both the same shit. It's just that one has more replayability than the other. Next!
Castlevania The Adventure.
As to how that this game is not number 1? Oh my god. What fucking drugs are you on? Castlevania The Adventure at 4th! Oh my god, the next games must be truly fucking the pinnacle of awful if you decide to put Castlevania The fucking Adventure at 4th. But no. I am a courteous person. I will allow this jester to explain as to why he ranked this at 4th.
If you haven't already, you absolutely need to try some of the handheld Castlevania games, specifically the GBA and DS games.
Agreed, as the GBA and the DS games are some of the best Castlevania games in the series. However, you still haven't explained as to why this is in 4th.
The Game Boy games, on the other hand, you can skip entirely, especially Castlevania The Adventure.
I wouldn't recommend it if you're trying to understand the lore of the franchise, but oh well, whatever.
The level design is super limited, it is boring as hell to play, many of the tricks and traps have been pulled from previous games, so there's almost no originality here.
Limited? Yes. Boring? No. Tedious? Absolutely. And by previous games, you mean Castlevania 1, 2, and possibly 3, right? Not the biggest pool to pull from. Oh, and trust me, later Castlevania games have been a lot more blatant with their asset usage.
And on top of that, because of how limited the Game Boy system is, there are moments where one enemy will be on screen and the game slows down drastically. It is unbearable. Basically, if you've played the original game or Simon's Quest, you've played the far superior version of The Adventure. On top of that, the levels go on way longer than a normal Game Boy title should. Do not subject yourself to this frustration. Your batteries are better spent on other games. And again, heaven forbid if you try to go and complete it on the Classic Collection, it is still frustrating on there. I played this on PlayStation 5, and it still ran like ass. It's awful. Don't. Just don't.
The rest of everything that he says is completely true. The game runs like fucking dog water. And I played on the fucking PC. Frame drops were constant. A friend of mine named J Faison can attest to this, as I streamed the game for the entire server to enjoy, only for me to be raging out of my damn mind in the second stage. So yes, I agree with his criticisms. I just don't believe that these criticisms are worth being in 4th place. In fact, these should be 1st. But now I'm wondering, what game is in 3rd exactly?
Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2.
There's no lick in shit that you are being serious right now. But you know what? I'm still the same courteous person as I was before this. So, I'm sure he'll probably give us a good explanation as to why he put this above The Adventure.
Man, Lords of Shadow 2 was a massive disappointment. The first Lords of Shadow and Mirror of Fate showed how Castlevania could properly migrate into the 3D space with its fast-paced action and intense boss fights. So how did the sequel falter so badly?
I'm sure the reason you're about to give makes total sense. Also, clearly this guy has forgotten that these two games existed. Or, you know, just never played them or didn't even think they existed.
Well, for starters, you put Castlevania in a modern day setting. You don't do that. That's not what makes Castlevania Castlevania. You don't do modern anything. You don't. You just don't. Seeing Castlevania in a present day environment just pulls all the gothic and majestic aesthetics the series has been known for. It just rips it right out, and you're just like, oh, it's The Last of Us, but with castles.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Are you fucking for real? Not even the fucking story. Not even the visual art style. The fucking setting. This is the same guy who told us to play the GBA and the DS Castlevania games, yet completely ignores the fact that one of the GBA games and one of the DS games takes place in the fucking future. Fucking Aria and Dawn of Sorrow. This excuse to hate a fucking game is the most hypocritical bullshit that I've ever fucking heard. You're gonna get on Lords of Shadow 2's ass for being in a modern setting, yet you're not gonna fucking get on Sorrow's ass for being in the fucking future. Are you serious? This list is so stupid. It's so fucking moronic. Like, it's beyond comprehension. It amazes me that fucking Mojo gets away with half of the fucking shit that they say sometimes, because it's so fucking stupid. Also, I have heard no single human being on this earth ever compare Lords of Shadow 2 to The Last of Us. And if you ask me, in this modern day climate where The Last of Us is deeply hated, that's a fucking insult. How do these people sleep at night?
It ends up looking like any other ordinary action game. Combat adds nothing interesting, degrading into mindless button mashing and violence. This was basically Castlevania trying to be God of War. That's what it was, but with a Last of Us looking setting.
Once again, clearly forgot that these two games existed. Also, to hell with this. Look, Lords of Shadow 2 is not even the best game in the series. It really isn't. But don't even bother to enter the conversation and say that this game is awful because it takes place in a modern setting. That shit is so stupid. Yes, I'm aware he made a point about the gameplay and how it feels repetitive, but that is no excuse to bring the fact that this game is awful because of the setting. You know what, let's move on. I'm getting supremely agitated from this list and we're not even done.
Castlevania Judgment.
And it gets worse.
Yeah, we all knew this was coming eventually. It's arguably one of the most notorious games in the entire franchise.
Is it notorious for doing something different, or is it notorious because you were told that everyone hates it? I can guarantee you, if you were to ask anyone who actually put in the hours in Castlevania Judgment, they will tell you, it is not a bad game. Sure, the cutscenes are a little weird because the lips are not properly synced, but that is as far as much of a critique as it goes. Sure, gameplay-wise it's not the easiest fighting game to get into, but what fighting game is? But you know what, I'll let him explain further.
We'll give Judgment some credit, alright? It managed to maintain the gothic aesthetic, unlike some games. That's
a bullshit critique, and you fucking know it.
And it isn't the most abysmal fighting game we've ever played. However, the biggest issue with this game is how it goes full-on anime with its character designs.
Oh my fucking god! Once again, the Hypocrite Factory has opened its doors for the public. How are you going to sit here with a straight face and say that Judgment is awful because of the art style that it has? Saying that it's an anime art style, but then completely ignore Dawn of Sorrow and Portrait of Ruin? I swear to you, he's cherry-picking examples and it's so fucking bad. Like, dude, you cannot fault one and then completely ignore the rest.
Every Castlevania character has gone through a drastic change in appearance that resembles nothing of their original designs.
I call bullshit.
Simon is now a moppy-haired dude in leather with exposed abs. Alucard looks like a Monty Python LARPer. Maria Renard is some dopey little girl who looks like she could be in any kind of anime. And Carmilla, okay, well, you know, her looks look a little bit, you know, justifiable. I mean, as Carmilla, she's supposed to look sexy in some weird ways.
No the fuck she's not. She's meant to be a fucking head, you freaking hypocrite. Here you're saying that the character redesigns look nothing like their original counterparts, yet you're gonna give Carmilla a fucking pass? Are you freaking for real? If you're going to be consistent, at least remain so.
But, wait a minute. The character designs were done by the co-creator of Death Note? Well, that explains some of the designs.
You mean all of them?
A Castlevania fighting game could very well work, but with these redesigns coupled with the awful camera and the cumbersome control scheme, Judgment failed in the worst ways possible, man. Like, I was super hyped for this game too when I was a kid, and it just was, no. It was awful.
Your main reason hinges on the fact that you do not like the art style. Sure, you also mentioned that the gameplay is a little cumbersome. However, if you played the game long enough, you would understand the basics of the controls. It's only probably cumbersome because A, you probably didn't play the game for all too long, or B, you didn't play the game at all. He's not gonna mention how bare bones the freaking arcade mode is. He's not gonna mention that the game's story mode is lackluster and a freaking hilarious excuse of a story mode. No, none of that. But no, we gotta be on the Castlevania fan side and easily say that Judgment is the worst game in the series because, God forbid I supply any good reasons for doing so. Once again, I'm noticing a fucking pattern with these, but these reasons are just so ludicrous. Okay, what's number 1?
Oh man, the last one. All those pachinkos.
That's it, I'm fucking done. This is such a cop-out answer, especially after the shit takes that you threw in this entire video. Nah shit that the fucking Pachinkos are the worst in the series, but guess what? None of us have played them. Why? Because they're only available in Japan, and unless you know somebody that had able to transfer a fucking Pachinko machine to you, I fucking doubt that you played the game at all. You only put this here because you want the fans on your side after the fucking shit show that was the rest of this list. But you know what? Good for you. Yes, we know Konami is greedy, but this shouldn't even be on the fucking list. This list, in its entirety, is the most mind-numbing shit I've ever had to sit myself through. I am genuinely upset. I know these are opinions, but my god, these are the worst. Somebody at fucking Mojo HQ had to create this for you, because there's no way you fucking wrote this yourself if you're a Castlevania fan. At the end of the day, this video was awful. Sure, maybe one day I'll do my own top 10 worst Castlevania games, but my god, this list is unacceptable. I don't know what they were smoking at Mojo HQ, but it must have been some dope shit to come up with this crap. But that's what I will leave you on. I'm Sir as a Valentine, and please stay cherryful, cause my god, if I ever had to deal with this shit again, I'm going to start a world war.